Now there's what I feel is very strongly though is a complete misunderstanding of what went wrong going around though that Nomura was the one that train wrecked Final Fantasy 15 and its storyline, and that it was his own stubbornness and refusal to actually change things that actually drove the game into the ground. And he was, the game was, the Versus project was almost 90% done before he was asked to step aside and ultimately did. And I think that this is where I would have to disagree with the analysis that's being shared, because I hate to break it to you, but what went wrong? We have seen dissections at this point of the game. We know what 13 verses was supposed to be versus what it ultimately ended up being, and what kills me is just that some of the storyline elements and verses were just actually at least intriguing enough to be worth playing, unlike what we ended up with and ended up getting, and the pile of shit that we ended up getting in the end. um yeah, I hate to break it to you, but Nomura's refusal to compromise, and the fact that the concern here was ultimately that it would not sell in certain countries, like probably most chiefly China would have had its issues with it, because of the cult elements of it and the fact that that kind of thing is banned in China. um I think that with 15, like, a big chunk of what we could demonize as having gone wrong is just the self censorship that took place on the game. I mean, and I think that what's so frustrating is just that when we started hearing about how the game was being rewritten over and over and over again, and that it was being reworked repeatedly, was that they were taking more and more and more and more of what they were concerned would be censored of the game out of the damn thing, and that was Tabata's job in the whole thing. And I don't really want to, uh, to point fingers at and blame people, because my general sense is just that all the people that were involved in this are good writers who just were thrust into an impossible situation and cobbled together a pile of shit, and were able to slap Final Fantasy on its basically title because of it, and because of the deadlines and everything else. We got a project that we got a release that it was just less than worthy of being released, that came out and was thrown into the market, into the hay of things. It was awful what we got. And I think that the Versus storyline would have at least been intriguing. It was, in a way, that the bromance behind this one just wasn't. I really walked away with a very profound sense of disappointment. I mean, it feels like such an understatement to call it mediocre, and a mediocre disappointment. I mean, I don't feel just disappointed. I literally hate this fucking game. I want to burn it all the way fucking down and not replace it. You know, like, spread antimatter, along the field there it used to remain, so that anything that tries to grow in the wasteland ends up dead for 1,000 years, over 1,000 years, and so that nobody else can try to fix it once it's been destroyed. Like, as far as my metaphors go, I I hate this, and I think that the only real cure for it would have been actually getting Versus 13 and its storyline, and I think that that's such a disappointment, and such a disappointing thing to actually say, because I have to tell Square Enix in saying this, and if they ever see this video, like, I hate to break it to you, but the storyline that you censored out of concern that it would be banned was actually an interesting storyline. And if I had not bonded to the characters the way that I did in that one, it would have been like a very Parasite Eve type situation, where it's like, I don't know that I really give a crap about the characters, but the concept is so intriguing. I have to see where things are going to go. you would have had that even if you didn't like, even if I didn't like the characters, um, the game and its cons and the concepts that were going into it and the themes would have been enough to hold its storyline up and together. And unfortunately, what we got was a pile of shit that was basically repeatedly over and over and over again scrapped and rebuilt because of the fact that they kept removing elements that they were concerned would be censored in various parts of the world. So we know an enormous chunk of what went wrong here was the self censorship, the fear of being banned in certain countries and everything. And so it's like you have people that are willing to come on here and basically point out that it was Nomura refusing to compromise, but it's like they destroyed the original vision of the game and then tried to rebuild on top of the ash of the game. And I don't know, I don't know how you walk away from that and think that it was his fault, for refusing to compromise. Because if it had been his vision, yeah, it would have been banned in certain countries in the world, but it would have been a game that was actually a good storyline compared to the pile of shit that they released instead just to sneak past the censors. I mean, people are reacting to it as though, as well that the self censorship in this whole game, like it's stupid because of all the aesthetic elements that make it obvious that they're still, a nation that worships the goddess of death. They're just not allowed to really explicitly explore those themes in it, because it will be banned in certain parts of the world. So, you've got the ghost artifact weapons and everything else, and they're like, yeah, so this censorship isn't really that deep. But I'm sitting there listening to this shit, and it's like, dude, like they removed like fucking 90 fucking percent of their original story, like that was supposed to be there in favor of this garbage heap. Like I'm sorry, but versus 13 would have actually been at least intriguing. But instead, we got a giant, pile of shit instead, just to get past the censors. So don't put this shit on Nomura and his refusal to compromise. What they released in his stead is a garbage, a big pile of garbage that came out of developers that were extremely talented, but just got put on this one cursed project. you know, so that they did a shit job on.